slap cracked across the coffee house like a rifle shot. For one frozen second, every cup, every laptop, every whispered business call inside the copper lantern fell into silence. A bright red mark bloomed across Marcus Drayton's cheek, just above the old pale scar that ran along his jaw. But he did not move. He did not raise a hand. He did not even blink. He simply stood there in his faded flight jacket, holding his 7-year-old daughter against his chest, while the billionaire in front of him stared back, still breathing hard from the fury that had made her strike him. Vivian Kessler expected him to cower. She expected him to apologize. She expected the tired-looking single father with scuffed boots and a little girl in a butterfly hoodie to understand his place in the world she believed she owned. But Marcus only looked at her with a stillness so deep that the room itself seemed to step backward. Maya's small fingers tightened around his collar. "Daddy," she whispered, trembling. Marcus's hand moved gently over her back, slow and steady, the same rhythm he had once used to keep his own heartbeat calm at 40,000 feet. When the aircraft around him was screaming and the ground was coming up fast, and the only thing between living and dying was a man who refused to panic. "I've got you, sweet pea," he said softly. Then he looked at Vivian again. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. "Are you finished?" That was when the first real fear entered Vivian Kessler's eyes, though she did not yet understand why. She did not know that the man she had slapped was not a minimum wage nobody, not a weak father, not a harmless stranger she could humiliate in public. She did not know that for 19 years, Marcus Drayton had flown machines that most engineers swore could not be flown. She did not know that aerospace executives across 3 continents still studied the test data he had brought back from flights that should have killed him. She did not know that the chief of naval air operations kept a photograph of Marcus on his office wall, or that the very contract she had flown to Chicago to sign depended on technology Marcus had helped prove was safe. And she did not know that the most dangerous thing about him was not what he could have done with his hands, but what he was choosing not to do with them. Before we go any further, tell me where you are watching from. Drop your city or your country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity, in grace, and in second chances, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe. These stories remind us that quiet strength does not need to shout. Sometimes it simply stands still until the truth makes the whole room go silent. Now, back to Marcus Drayton. That morning in Chicago had begun with sunlight, a blueberry muffin, and one small promise. Marcus Drayton had chosen the corner booth at the Copper Lantern because it gave him a clear view of the entrance, the side exit, the counter, and the short hallway that led back toward the restrooms. Old habits did not retire just because a man did. He sat with his back near the wall, his shoulders relaxed enough that ordinary people would never notice, his eyes moving just enough that a trained person would understand he had never fully left the cockpit. To everyone else, he looked like any rugged single father in his early 40s. A weathered face, a faded green flight jacket, worn jeans, leather boots that had seen rain and grease and far too many years. But another pilot would have seen more. The way his hands rested lightly near the edge of the table, the faint scar along his jaw, the measured, even breathing, the calm that was not laziness but readiness. Across from him, Maya Drayton was destroying a blueberry muffin with the seriousness of a tiny demolition expert. She wore a denim jacket covered in iron on butterflies, bright pink sneakers, and 2 socks that did not match, because Marcus had learned a long time ago to choose his battles carefully. At 7 years old, Maya was light, and bright and stubborn in the way children become when life has already taken too much from them too early. Her mother, Diane, had died when Maya was 4, after a long fight with breast cancer that emptied Marcus's savings, his sleep, and the part of him that still believed surviving a burning aircraft meant he understood what pain really was. He had been a naval test pilot then, the kind of man they called when a new airframe came off the line and nobody could promise it would hold together in a hard turn. He had pushed prototypes past the edge of the flight envelope, recovered from spins that the computer models said were unrecoverable, and brought home data that saved the lives of pilots he would never meet. He had felt the gray creep into the corners of his vision under heavy gravity, fought it back with nothing but trained breathing and pure will, and landed planes with pieces missing that should not have been able to land at all. But no flight had ever prepared him for sitting beside Diane's hospital bed, while she grew smaller beneath the white sheets and whispered, "Promise me she'll still laugh." So Marcus walked away. He turned down the contracts, packed away the commendations Maya had never seen, moved to Chicago to be near Diane's sister, and built a quiet life around school pickups, park afternoons, grocery lists, bedtime stories, and the sacred daily work of keeping one little girl's world soft. That morning, Maya had asked for hot chocolate. Marcus had said yes because she had gone a full week without a single nightmare. She had asked for the big muffin too, the one with the sugar crystals on top. Marcus had said yes, because sometimes fathers celebrate victories that no one else can see. "Daddy," Maya said, her cheeks round with muffin, "can we go to the lake after this?" Marcus smiled, and when Marcus smiled, the hard lines of his face briefly remembered the man he had been before the sky taught him to watch the horizon for trouble. "Only if you finish that muffin without wearing half of it," he said. Maya looked down at the crumbs scattered across her jacket. "Too late," she said. "Then we negotiate," he said. She giggled, and the sound did something to him that no aircraft ever had. It made the whole room worth enduring. The Copper Lantern was crowded that morning with tech founders, lobbyists, content creators, and venture capitalists, all of them speaking softly about money in a way that was loud enough to be admired. Espresso machines hissed behind the counter. Keyboards clicked. Expensive cologne mixed with the warm smell of coffee and fresh pastry. It was exactly the kind of place Marcus disliked. Too many exits to track, too many phones, too many people who assumed that price and value were the same thing. But Maya loved the hot chocolate with the little curls of dark chocolate on top, so Marcus came. Love often means walking into rooms you would rather avoid, because someone small feels happy there. Then Vivian Kessler walked in. She did not enter like a customer. She entered like a hostile takeover. A white tailored suit, dark sunglasses she did not bother to remove indoors. Heels that probably cost more than Marcus's first car. Two assistants orbited around her, both clutching tablets, both wearing the specific exhausted fear of people who had not slept properly in weeks. Behind her moved a large man in a dark suit, her bodyguard, whose eyes swept the room with a familiarity that Marcus recognized at once. That was not the look of a hired civilian. That was the look of a man who had once worn a uniform. Vivian was 44, the founder and chief executive of Apex Aerodyne, a multi-billion-dollar aerospace manufacturing empire with its hands in private aviation, satellite systems, and defense supply chains. The business magazines called her a visionary. Former employees called her merciless. Competitors called her expensive trouble. She called herself unstoppable. That morning, she was in Chicago to finalize a classified defense contract worth more than the annual budget of some entire nations. And a delay in the paperwork had put her in the kind of mood that made everyone around her speak in short, careful sentences. "I do not care what the lawyers said." She snapped into her phone as she pushed straight past the line. "If they cannot finalize clean contract language by noon, replace them. I am not losing $4 billion because some senior counsel suddenly grew a conscience." A young man in a startup hoodie glanced up as she cut in front of him. "Excuse me," he said. "The line actually starts back there." Vivian lowered her phone just enough to look at him over the top of her sunglasses. "I make more money while I am blinking than you will make in your entire life," she said. "Do not confuse standing near me with mattering to me." The young man flushed red and stepped back. A few people stared. Most looked down at their cups. Wealth has a strange way of making cowardice feel like good manners, Marcus thought, but he said nothing. He had learned a long time ago that not every arrogant person in a room was his problem to solve. His assignment that morning was Maya, his coffee, his promise of the lake. Maya, meanwhile, had decided to clean up her own muffin wrapper like a big girl. She slid out of the booth with her mug of hot chocolate held carefully in both hands, balancing it, humming a cartoon song under her breath. Marcus tracked her movement without even thinking about it. Maya heading toward the trash can. About 12 feet. Path mostly clear. He noted Vivian's path the way he had once noted other aircraft in a crowded pattern. She was moving fast. Eyes locked on her phone, on a course that would cross his daughter's path in about 3 seconds. His body reacted before his mind finished the calculation. "Maya, stop," he said. His voice cut clean through the noise of the cafe, low and absolutely level. Maya froze halfway across the floor. But Vivian rounded the corner of the pastry display at that exact instant, still staring at her phone, and walked directly into her. The ceramic mug shattered. Hot chocolate splashed across the polished floor and spotted the toe of Vivian's white shoes. Maya fell backward hard, landing on the concrete with a small gasp that turned every cell in Marcus's body to ice. The cafe stopped. Even the espresso machine seemed to hiss more quietly. Maya sat stunned in the middle of the broken ceramic and the spreading brown puddle. Her eyes wide, her lower lip already beginning to tremble. Vivian looked down, not at the child first, at her shoes, and her face changed. Not into concern, into fury. "You clumsy little brat," she snapped. Maya's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry," the little girl whispered. "Do you have any idea what these shoes cost?" Vivian's voice climbed, sharp and ugly enough to turn heads across the entire room. "Where are your parents? Who lets a child wander around a place like this, like some kind of stray animal?" She reached down as if to grab Maya by the arm. She never touched her. Marcus was already there. No one saw him cross the distance. One moment he was in the booth. The next moment he was standing between Vivian Kessler and his daughter, a wall of worn leather and scar tissue and silent authority. He did not shove Vivian. He did not shout. He simply put his body where danger had no permission to pass. "Step back," he said. Vivian recoiled half a step, startled by the sheer suddenness of him. For just a fraction of a second, some old animal instinct seemed to warn her that she was standing far too close to something she did not understand. But pride murdered that instinct quickly. She looked him over. The worn jacket, the old boots, the inexpensive watch, the tired face. Her calculation was immediate, and it was completely wrong. Poor, powerless, easily dismissed. Marcus crouched without taking his eyes off her and lifted Maya gently into his arms. Maya buried her face in his shoulder and cried quietly, embarrassed and shaken. His hand cupped the back of her head. "You're okay, sweet pea. I've got you." Then he stood and he faced Vivian. "You walked into her because you were staring at your phone," he said. "You are going to lower your voice. You are going to apologize to my daughter, and then you are going to walk away." Vivian laughed, loud and brittle. "Apologize?" she said. "To her?" "Yes," Marcus said. "Your feral little creature ruined a pair of shoes worth more than your car," she said. Marcus's eyes did not change. "Shoes can be cleaned," he said. "Children remember." That line landed harder than he expected. A woman near the counter looked down at her hands. A barista stopped wiping the machine. The young tech worker, Vivian, had insulted earlier, raised his phone slightly. He was recording now. Vivian felt the shift in the room, and she hated it. People were watching her, not with admiration, but with judgment. "Listen to me," she hissed. "I am Vivian Kessler. I own people like you. I buy and sell companies before breakfast. I am in this city to sign a defense contract that would pay for your miserable little life 10,000 times over. If you think I am going to stand here and be lectured by some broken-down nobody with a badly dressed kid, then you have lost your mind." Maya flinched at the word kid, shrinking deeper into Marcus's neck. Marcus's breathing changed, slower, quieter. "Do not speak about my daughter again," he said. Vivian stepped closer. "Or what?" she said. The room seemed to tighten around them. Marcus did not look angry. That was what made it so much worse. "Angry men warn you. Calm men have already made their decision. Or you will regret it," he said softly. Vivian's face flushed with humiliation, and humiliation made her reckless. "I will call child services," she said. "I will tell them you threatened me. I will have her taken away from you before lunch. People like you always have something to hide." That was the first moment Marcus considered ending the conversation in a way the room would never forget. Not because she had insulted him. That meant nothing. Men had screamed at him in 3 languages while the ground rushed up to meet them. But she had threatened Maya, his daughter, Diane's last laugh left in this world, the promise he had made over a hospital bed. Marcus's heart rate slowed, his focus narrowed. Vivian became less of a person and more of a problem requiring containment. "You're done talking," he said. "Leave." But Vivian Kessler had lived too long without consequences. Power had trained her to believe that every boundary was an insult to her. Rage made her careless. She drew back her hand, and she slapped him across the face with everything she had. The sound froze the café. A small steel pitcher slipped from a barista's hand and clattered against the tile floor. Someone gasped, someone whispered, "Oh my God!" Vivian's palm stung. Marcus's cheek reddened. Maya whimpered against his collar, and Marcus did nothing. That stillness broke something open in the room. Everyone had expected violence, or, at the very least, shouting. But Marcus simply stood there, absorbing the insult the way a mountain absorbs a storm. Vivian, still breathing hard, stared at him. For the first time, she noticed that he had barely moved from the impact. She noticed the scar near his jaw. She noticed the cold and total absence of fear in his eyes. "Are you finished?" he asked. His voice was flat. No drama, no threat, just a question that somehow sounded like the last chance a person gets before a door closes forever. Then the glass doors swung open. Theo Banks pushed through the gathering crowd, one hand already moving toward the inside of his jacket, his massive frame forcing customers gently aside. "Ma'am, step back," he barked. Then to Marcus, "You, put the child down and move away from her before I put you on the floor." Marcus did not move. Theo took 2 more steps closer, and then he saw the scar, then he saw the eyes. And then he saw the faded outline of a tattoo on Marcus's right forearm, where the sleeve of the flight jacket had shifted while he held Maya. A small pair of wings, crossed with an anchor, and beneath it a squadron number that Theo Banks had not seen in 11 years. Theo stopped so suddenly that his polished shoes squeaked against the floor. All the color left his face. His hand fell away from his jacket. For 11 years, Theo Banks had carried a memory from his service that woke him some nights still drenched in sweat. He had been a young flight deck crewman aboard a carrier in the Pacific, a test flight gone wrong, an experimental aircraft, a problem with the new wing design, a pilot wrestling a machine that wanted to tear itself apart. Theo had been on the deck that day, certain he was about to watch a man die in front of the whole crew. But the pilot had not died. The pilot had fought the aircraft down through a storm that should have ended him, riding the failure all the way to the deck, holding the broken thing level by sheer skill long enough for the crew to survive what came next. When the canopy finally opened, the man who climbed out, pale and shaking, and somehow still steady, had a scar along his jaw and a quiet voice, and the kind of calm that the whole flight deck spoke about for years afterward. They called him the man who could not be rattled, Commander Marcus Drayton, a test pilot whose name was spoken in naval aviation circles with a mixture of awe, gratitude, and a little bit of fear. And now Theo Banks was standing 4 feet away from him in a coffee shop, having just threatened to put him on the floor. Theo slowly raised both hands, palms out. "Commander," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I'm sorry. I didn't know it was you." The cafe went so quiet that a spoon settling into a saucer sounded enormous. Vivian stared at her bodyguard. "Theo," she said. "What are you doing?" He did not look at her. His eyes stayed on Marcus. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low and urgent, "you need to apologize. Right now, and then we need to leave." "Apologize?" Vivian shrieked. "Have you lost your mind?" "He threatened me." Theo finally turned to her, and what she saw in his face made her step back. It was not the fear of losing his job. It was pity. "No, ma'am," he said. "You threatened his child, and then you struck him in public. You work for me," she said. "Not anymore," he answered. He reached up, removed his earpiece, and dropped it onto the floor. "I quit." Vivian's mouth opened. No sound came out. Theo looked at Marcus again. "Commander, I apologize for how I came in. I did not recognize you." Marcus's eyes rested on him. "You were doing your job," he said. Theo swallowed hard. No, sir, he said. I was doing hers. That sentence crossed the room like a blade. Phones were up everywhere now, recording, capturing not just a confrontation, but a complete reversal. The billionaire in the white suit was losing command of the very man she paid to enforce her will. Vivian looked around the room and realized, slowly, that the people in it were no longer afraid of her. They were watching. They were judging. They were waiting. Her ego panicked before her mind did. This is absurd, she snapped. I do not care what little soldier fantasy you two share. I am Vivian Kessler. I am here to sign a $4 billion defense contract. I have senators who return my calls within the hour. I have admirals who know my name. I am not about to be humiliated in a coffee shop by a washed-up pilot and a coward in a cheap suit. Marcus shifted Maya slightly in his arms. Take your win and leave, he said. My win? She laughed wildly. You think this is over? I will call Admiral Foster right now. He runs defense acquisitions for the entire program. He will have the local police drag you out of here. And by dinner, your little girl will be sitting in some government office while they investigate whether a violent man should be raising a child at all. Marcus's jaw tightened. Don't, Theo said quietly. Vivian, don't, but she was already dialing. She put the phone on speaker and held it up like a weapon. It rang twice. A deep, irritated voice answered. Vivian, this had better be about the final documents. Raymond, she said, instantly sliding into a polished, pleasant tone so fake that several customers exchanged disgusted looks. I am so sorry to interrupt you, but I have just been assaulted in a coffee shop downtown. Some unstable local man threatened me after his child destroyed my property. My own bodyguard is refusing to step in because he apparently knows the man. I need assistance immediately. There was a pause. Vivian, call local law enforcement, the voice said. I am in the middle of a briefing. He called him Commander, Vivian said, glaring at Marcus. Apparently the man has a scar and some kind of Navy tattoo, and my bodyguard is acting like he just saw a ghost. The line went silent. Not quiet. Silent. Vivian's expression flickered. Raymond? When Admiral Raymond Foster's voice returned, it had changed completely. The irritation was gone. In its place was something careful. Describe him again, the Admiral said. I just did, Vivian said. Flight jacket, scar on his jaw, a tattoo, holding some crying child, another silence. Then the Admiral said, very slowly, put him on the phone. Vivian blinked. Excuse me? Put him on the phone, Vivian, now. The command in his voice was so sharp that even she obeyed. She held the phone out toward Marcus. Marcus did not take it. He simply leaned slightly toward the speaker. Foster, he said. It's Drayton. On the other end of the line, inside a secure office hundreds of miles away, Admiral Raymond Foster closed his eyes and lowered his head into one hand. He knew that voice. Every senior officer connected to naval aviation knew that voice. Marcus Drayton had flown the aircraft that nobody else would. He had brought back the test data that rewrote the safety manuals. He had proven, with his own life on the line, that a wing design the engineers were ready to abandon could in fact be saved. And that design had gone on to fly in machines that protected thousands of people who would never know his name. Foster owed him more than respect. Foster owed him the lives of men who had flown safely because Marcus had flown dangerously first. Marcus, the Admiral said, and everyone in the café heard the reverence in that single word. It has been a long time. How is Maya? Vivian's face went pale. The phone trembled slightly in her hand. Marcus rubbed Maya's back. She was having a good morning, he said. Then your contractor here walked into her, knocked her to the floor, screamed in her face, threatened to have her taken away from me, and slapped me when I asked her to apologize. The silence that followed felt endless. When Foster's voice returned, it was cold. She slapped you? She did, Marcus said. Vivian rushed in, panicking now. Raymond, wait. He intimidated me. He was aggressive. His child ruined a very expensive stop talking, Foster snapped. The force of it made Vivian flinch. You are standing in front of a man, the Admiral said, who gave more to this country than your entire boardroom could understand if I briefed them for a week. The fact that you struck him and you are still standing is not evidence of your power. It is evidence of his restraint. Vivian's lips parted. Raymond, the contract. There is no contract, Foster said. The words fell cleanly. Effective immediately, Apex Aerodyne is suspended from all defense acquisition discussions, pending a full review. Vivian staggered as if he had reached through the phone and struck her back. You cannot do that, she said. I can, the Admiral said, and I just did. My board will sue, she said. Your board, Foster said, is going to be far too busy answering questions from federal auditors. If your judgment allows you to physically assault a decorated naval aviator while threatening his child in a public café, then I have serious concerns about your judgment handling classified aerospace systems. Do not call me again unless your legal counsel is in the room with you. His voice softened only when he spoke to Marcus again. Marcus, the Admiral said, I am sorry, truly. Give Maya my best. Marcus nodded once, though the Admiral could not see it. Take care, Raymond, he said. The call ended. Vivian Kessler stood in the middle of the cafe. The phone still raised in her hand, her face stripped of all its color. In less than 2 minutes, the foundation of her empire had cracked in front of baristas. Venture capitalists, students, content creators, and one little girl with tears drying on her cheeks. The room was silent again, but this was a different kind of silence. It was not shock now. It was consequence, a slow, moral stillness, the kind that fills a room when arrogance finally meets the wall it always believed was a door. Then came the police lights, red and blue flashing across the front windows. 2 Chicago police officers stepped inside, hands resting near their belts, eyes moving across the crowd. The older one, Officer Reyes, took in the shattered mug, the spilled hot chocolate, the tense customers, the trembling woman in the white suit, and the father holding a child with a clear red handprint on his face. We got a call about a disturbance, Officer Reyes said. Vivian lunged toward them as if salvation had finally arrived in uniform. Officers, thank God, she said. Arrest that man. He threatened me. He assaulted me. His child attacked me, and my own bodyguard has completely lost his mind. Officer Reyes looked at Marcus, then at Maya, then at the mark on Marcus's face. Before Marcus could say a word, the young tech worker Vivian had insulted earlier stood up. His voice shook, but he did not sit back down. Officer, he said, she's lying. Vivian spun on him. You little I recorded the whole thing. He continued, holding up his phone. She cut the line. She insulted half the people in here. She ran into the little girl because she was staring at her phone. She screamed at the kid. She threatened the father, and then she slapped him. I have all of it. A woman near the counter stood up too. So do I, she said. Me too, said a man from the back. I have it from a different angle, said another. The little girl did absolutely nothing. For the first time that morning, Vivian Kessler had no room left to rewrite reality. Officer Reyes sighed, with the weary expression of a man who had watched too many powerful people expect the law to bend itself around their shoes. Ma'am, he said, turn around and put your hands behind your back. Vivian recoiled. Absolutely not. Do you have any idea who I am? I know that you are being placed under arrest for assault, the officer said. I will have your badge, she said. You can discuss that downtown, he answered. The handcuffs clicked around her wrists. That sound changed the room more than the Admiral's call had. The phone call had wounded her empire. The cuffs touched her body. Vivian began shouting then, all of her control gone at once. She threatened lawsuits, careers, city officials, judges. No one moved to help her. Theo stood off to the side, his face grim. The baristas watched. The customers recorded. Marcus turned Maya slightly away, so she would not have to see the worst of it. When the officers led Vivian toward the door, she looked back once at Marcus, with hatred and fear tangled together in her eyes. He did not return either one. He did not gloat. He did not smile. Revenge was not what had carried him across that cafe. Love was, that was all. As the doors closed behind her, the noise of the cafe did not come rushing back. People seemed unsure what sound was even appropriate after something like that. A barista approached with shaking hands. Sir, she said, I am so sorry. We can replace the hot chocolate and the mug and whatever, she said. Marcus shook his head gently. It's all right, he said. No, the barista said, surprising herself with the firmness in her own voice. It wasn't. Marcus looked at her, and then he nodded once. No, he agreed quietly. It wasn't. Maya lifted her head from his shoulder. Her eyes were red. Daddy, she said. I dropped the cup. That almost broke him. Not the slap, not the threats, not the memories that Theo's recognition had stirred up from the bottom of him. It was that small apology from a child who in that moment believed that broken ceramic mattered more than her own fear. Marcus kissed her forehead. Cups can be replaced, sweet pea, he said. She was mad, Maya whispered. Yes, Marcus said. 'Cause of me? No, Marcus said, and his voice softened into something the entire cafe could feel. Because some people carry storms around inside them. Sweet pea, and they blame whoever happens to get wet. Maya thought about that for a moment. Do we still get the lake? She asked. A small, astonished laugh moved through the crowd. Marcus smiled, real and warm. We still get the lake, he said. And ice cream? Now you're negotiating like a professional, he said. With sprinkles? All the sprinkles, he said. Theo stepped closer, slowly, respectfully. Commander, he said. Marcus looked at him. Theo, he said. The big man seemed smaller now, not out of weakness, but out of something closer to humility. The Pacific, Theo said quietly. The bad test flight. The wing failure. I was on the deck that day. We all thought you were gone. Marcus's eyes softened, almost imperceptibly. A lot of good people kept that aircraft flying long enough for me to bring it home, he said. I just held the stick. You held a lot more than that, sir, Theo said. He paused, then looked at Maya. Your dad is a good man. Maya sniffled and rested her cheek against Marcus's shoulder. I know, she said. That answer made the whole cafe go quiet again. But gently this time. Marcus carried her past the tables. As he reached the door, the young tech worker stepped forward awkwardly. Sir, he said, I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner. Marcus paused. You said something when it mattered, he said. The young man nodded, ashamed and relieved at the same time. Outside, Chicago sunlight spilled across the sidewalk, warm and golden after the cold cruelty of the cafe. Marcus stepped into it with Maya in his arms, leaving behind the broken mug, the spilled chocolate, the phones, the whispers, and the empire that had just begun to shake. He did not look back, but consequences do not end just because a man walks away from them. By noon, the video had spread across social media. At first, the headline writers used the simple language of outrage. Billionaire chief executive slaps single father in Chicago cafe. Then the veterans began identifying Marcus. Not with classified details, not with stories that could never be told, but with enough reverence to change the entire tone of the conversation. Former flight crew recognizes test pilot legend. Decorated naval aviator stays calm while billionaire threatens his child. Defense contractor loses program after public assault. By late afternoon, the stock of Apex Aerodyne had fallen hard enough to trigger emergency phone calls. Board members, who had happily tolerated Vivian's cruelty when it produced revenue, suddenly discovered a deep moral concern when that cruelty began to threaten the share price. Federal auditors announced a review. The Defense Program Office confirmed that all pending Apex acquisition discussions were paused. Vivian's attorneys issued a careful statement about a stressful misunderstanding. The internet replayed the slap a few million times and did not misunderstand a single thing. Marcus learned most of this from Theo, who called once. Not to gossip, but to warn him that reporters had started gathering outside the cafe and searching through public records. Marcus's first instinct was to disappear. Old training: protect the perimeter, control your exposure, keep Maya far away from the cameras. But that evening, while Maya drew butterflies at the kitchen table in their small rented house, Marcus stood at the sink washing dishes and realized something that felt almost heavier than any flight he had ever flown. Maya had watched a powerful adult hurt someone and then lie about it, but she had also watched strangers stand up. She had watched a bodyguard tell the truth and walk away from his paycheck. She had watched an admiral defend a man's honor over a speakerphone. And she had watched her own father refuse violence when violence would have been so easy. That lesson mattered, not the headlines. Not the contracts, the lesson. Daddy, Maya called from the table. Was that lady bad? Marcus dried his hands slowly. He turned and leaned back against the counter. Diane would have known exactly what to say. Diane had always been better with the soft truths. Marcus had spent too many years living inside the hard ones. She did a bad thing, he said. Maya frowned. But is she bad? She asked. Marcus came and sat across from her. I don't know, sweet pea, he said. Sometimes people build a whole life where nobody ever tells them no. And then the very first time someone does, all the ugly that they have been hiding comes pouring out. Maya colored a butterfly wing a deep purple. Do you think she's sorry? She asked. Marcus thought of Vivian's face as the cuffs went on. He had seen fear there, and rage and humiliation. He had not seen sorrow. Not yet. I hope she becomes sorry, he said. That's different. Maya nodded, accepting this with the quiet seriousness that children give to the things adults make complicated. You didn't hit her back, she said. No, he said. Were you scared? Marcus smiled faintly. Not of her, he said. Then why didn't you? He looked down at his hands. Hands that had once wrestled aircraft out of the sky. Hands that now packed lunchboxes, fixed ponytails, washed dishes, and held a child steady after a cruel world had knocked her to the floor. Because being strong, he said, does not mean doing everything you are able to do. Sometimes being strong means choosing what not to do. Maya considered this. Like not eating all the sprinkles at once? She asked. Marcus laughed. Exactly like that, he said. She smiled. And for Marcus, the day became survivable. Now here is the part most people never expect. Because if you think a woman like Vivian Kessler loses everything in a single afternoon and then quietly learns her lesson, you do not yet understand what real pride looks like when it is cornered. Stay with me. What she did next surprised even the people who already despised her. 3 days later, the formal letter arrived. Not from Vivian, from her legal team. It was 4 pages long, and not one sentence in it contained the word sorry. Instead, it was a careful, expensive, surgical attempt to reframe the entire event. It described Marcus as physically intimidating. It described Maya, a 7-year-old child, as out of control. It claimed that Vivian had acted in reasonable fear for her own safety. It demanded that Marcus issue a public statement clarifying that he had, quote, escalated the situation, in exchange for which Apex Aerodyne would generously decline to pursue charges of its own. Marcus read the whole thing twice at the kitchen table. Then he set it down very gently. The way you set down something you do not want to break only because breaking it would feel too good. Diane's sister Renee was visiting that afternoon. She read it over his shoulder, and her mouth fell open. She is suing you, Renee said. She slapped a child's father in front of 40 witnesses. And she is suing you. She is not suing me, Marcus said. She is trying to rewrite the story before the story finishes telling itself. She has done it her whole life. It usually works. It is not going to work this time, Renee said. No, Marcus agreed. I don't think it is. Because here is what Vivian Kessler did not understand. She believed that the danger to her was Marcus. She believed that if she could discredit him, control him, frighten him, the whole thing would simply go away, the way her problems always went away. She had spent a lifetime treating the truth as a negotiation, and she could not comprehend even now that some truths do not negotiate. The video did not need Marcus to say a single word. It had already been seen by millions of people from a dozen different angles, and the more aggressively her lawyers pushed, the worse it looked, because the public had eyes, and the public had the footage, and the public was not in the mood to be told that what they had watched with their own eyes had not happened. When a journalist obtained the legal letter and published it, the response was not sympathy. It was disgust. The story shifted again. Billionaire who slapped single dad now demands he apologize to her. That headline did more damage to Vivian Kessler than the slap itself. The board of Apex Aerodyne held an emergency meeting. The federal review deepened. 2 senators who had once returned her calls within the hour suddenly could not be reached at all. And still, through every bit of it, Vivian refused to bend. She told her board it was a coordinated smear campaign. She told her lawyers to be more aggressive, not less. She told a friendly reporter, in an interview that aged like milk left in the sun, that she had simply enforced a standard of behavior, that the café had failed to enforce itself. and that she would not apologize for holding people to a higher standard. That sentence, more than any other, sealed her fate, because the country had now watched her, in her own words, describe screaming at a frightened 7-year-old child as holding people to a higher standard. 6 weeks after the café, the board of Apex Aerodyne voted to remove Vivian Kessler as chief executive of the company she had founded. They did it in a single afternoon, in the same kind of executive boardroom where she had removed so many others. The press release thanked her for her years of visionary leadership, and then it changed the locks. She did not go quietly. She gave a statement on the courthouse steps before her own hearing, dressed in a severe dark suit, and even then, even with everything gone, she did not say the word. "I acted to protect myself and my property," she told the cameras. "I regret that it was filmed in a way that did not capture the full context, but I will not be bullied into apologizing for defending a standard." Inside the courtroom, the facts were not interested in her standard. The video was played. The witnesses spoke. The young tech worker testified about the line and the insults and the moment Vivian had run into Maya. The barista testified about the slap. And a third witness, an off-duty nurse who had been sitting near the window, testified that she had watched a little girl apologize for dropping a cup while a grown woman screamed at her, and that in 20 years of emergency rooms, she had rarely seen an adult behave so cruelly toward a child. The judge listened to all of it. Then she looked at Vivian Kessler for a long moment over the top of her glasses. "Miss Kessler," the judge said, "you have had every advantage that this world can offer a person, and you used them, in that café, to terrify a child and to strike her father. The most troubling thing I have heard today is not what you did. It is that you still cannot bring yourself to say that it was wrong." Vivian's attorney closed his eyes. The judge ordered restitution to the café, a significant fine, community service, and a court-mandated anger management program. The assault conviction went on her record permanently. It was not prison, but for a woman whose entire identity had been built on being untouchable, it was a kind of public unmaking that no amount of money could ever buy back. Marcus was there for the hearing, in the back, in a clean collared shirt, with Renee sitting beside him. Maya was not. Marcus had decided, carefully, that some rooms are not for children. But when it was over, and the reporters surged toward the doors, Vivian Kessler passed within a few feet of him in the marble hallway. For a moment, the two of them stood almost level. The billionaire who had owned people, and the quiet man she had slapped. She looked at him, and Marcus saw in that look that she had still not understood. There was no sorrow in her face. There was only the cold, bewildered fury of someone who genuinely could not comprehend how the world had failed to recognize that she was right. "You did this," she said very quietly, so only he could hear. Marcus held her gaze. He did not raise his voice. "No," he said, "you did. I just stood still long enough for everyone to see it." Then he walked out into the daylight. And he did not look back, and that was the last time Marcus Drayton ever spoke to Vivian Kessler. The months that followed were quieter than Marcus expected, and kinder than he had dared to hope. The story, strangely, did not fade the way these things usually fade. People held on to it, not the slap. People forget a slap. What they held on to was the stillness. The image of a tired father in a worn jacket who had every reason in the world to strike back, and who chose, with a child watching, not to. Veterans wrote to him. Single parents wrote to him. A flight school in Indiana wrote to ask if he would ever consider speaking to their students, not about the café, but about flying, and about what it really means to keep your head when everything around you is failing. Marcus almost said no. Old habits. Protect the perimeter. Keep Maya away from the noise. But Maya, it turned out, had opinions. "You used to fly planes," she said one evening, with the blunt curiosity of a 7-year-old who had recently overheard the adults talking. Real ones, the fast kind. "I did. Why did you stop?" He was quiet for a moment. "Because I needed to be here," he said. "With you." Maya considered this. "But you could do both," she said. "You could fly and you could be my dad. You just have to come home." Out of the mouths of children comes the kind of clarity that takes most adults a lifetime to find. So Marcus said yes to the flight school, and then he said yes to a second one. And then, almost a year after the morning in the café, he said yes to something he never could have imagined saying yes to. The Defense Program Office, the same office that had suspended Apex Aerodyne, reached out through Admiral Foster and asked whether Commander Marcus Drayton would consider joining a civilian safety review board. They wanted someone who understood the aircraft from the inside, someone who had felt the failures in his own body, someone whose judgment they could trust completely. They wanted, in other words, exactly the kind of man that Vivian Kessler had tried to have dragged out of a coffee shop in handcuffs. Marcus took the position, and the first time he walked into that boardroom, in a building full of the very people who had once whispered about the café video, no one whispered. They stood. A room full of engineers and officers and executives, the kind of people who measured each other in titles and contracts, stood up for a quiet man in a flight jacket who had simply refused on one ordinary morning to let another person's cruelty decide what kind of man he would be. And it was there, in that world he had walked away from and then walked back into on his own terms, that Marcus met Imani Reed. Imani was the chair of an aerospace foundation that funded safety research, the kind of woman who had spent 30 years earning every ounce of the respect she carried. She had been a flight engineer herself once, decades earlier, one of the few women in the room in an era that had not wanted her there, and she had outlasted every single person who had doubted her. She was sharp and warm and entirely unimpressed by power for its own sake, which is a rare and beautiful thing in a person who has been near power her whole life. She had seen the café video, like everyone had. But that was not what drew her to Marcus. What drew her to him was the way he listened in meetings, fully, without performing. The way he asked the engineers questions instead of telling them answers. The way, when a young analyst made a mistake in a presentation, Marcus quietly helped her fix it afterward instead of correcting her in front of the room. "You are not what I expected," Imani told him once over coffee, months into knowing him. "What did you expect?" Marcus asked. "A man performing his own legend," she said. "Most of them do." Marcus smiled. "I'm too tired to perform," he said. "I've got a 7-year-old. Imani laughed, a real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere deep. And it grew slowly, the way the best things do. A shared coffee became a shared dinner. A shared dinner became Imani sitting cross-legged on the floor of Marcus's small rented house, being judged, with absolute solemnity, in a butterfly drawing contest run by a 7-year-old who had appointed herself head referee. "She's good," Imani whispered to Marcus, studying Maya's drawing with exaggerated seriousness. "She knows," Marcus whispered back. It was not loud. It was not a headline. It was not the kind of love that announces itself. It was the kind that simply shows up, quietly, on an ordinary evening, and stays. As for Vivian Kessler, the world moved on without her, which was perhaps the cruelest punishment of all for a woman who had built her entire self around being impossible to ignore. She surfaced occasionally, in a lawsuit she lost, in an interview no one finished reading, in a failed attempt to start a new company that no serious investor would touch. She never apologized. To the very end, she insisted that she had been the victim, that the world had been unfair, that she had simply held people to a standard. And here is the part that landed harder than any courtroom ever could. Almost 2 years after the café, there was a gala in Chicago. An aerospace industry event, the kind with a private cocktail hour and too many speeches. Marcus did not want to go. Imani gently insisted, because the foundation was being honored, and because, she said, "You have spent your whole life letting other people stand in the light. Come stand in it for one night." So Marcus went, in a simple dark suit with Imani on his arm, into a ballroom full of the most powerful people in the industry, and the room, when he entered, turned toward him the way rooms now did. Not with fear, with respect. People crossed the floor to shake his hand. A young engineer told him, nervously, that the café video was the reason she had not quit after her own boss screamed at her. An admiral introduced him to a senator as the finest pilot he had ever known. And across that ballroom near the back, holding a glass of wine she was not really drinking, stood Vivian Kessler. She had finagled an invitation through some old connection, the way the formerly powerful do, hoping to be seen, hoping to be relevant again. And instead she stood, ignored and alone, and watched the man she had slapped in a coffee shop be celebrated by the entire industry she had once believed she ruled. She watched him laugh. She watched a brilliant, respected woman look at him with open affection. She watched a senator shake his hand. She watched the room arrange itself around his quiet decency the way it had once arranged itself around her loud cruelty. Marcus saw her once across the room. Their eyes met for less than a second. He did not gloat. He did not glare. He simply gave her a small, even nod, the kind one gives a stranger, and then he turned back to Imani and to the life he had built out of the wreckage of that morning. And he did not think about Vivian Kessler again for the rest of the night. That nod was the worst thing he could have done to her, and he did not even mean it as a weapon. It was simply the truth. She no longer mattered to him. She had built her whole life on mattering, on being feared, on being obeyed. And in the end, the man she had tried hardest to destroy had become a person who could look at her and feel nothing at all but a distant, peaceful sort of pity. She left the gala early. Marcus stayed until the lights came up. Later that night, after the gala, after the long drive home, after Imani had gone back to her own place, with a quiet kiss at the door and a promise to call in the morning, Marcus checked on Maya the way he did every night. She was asleep, sprawled sideways across her bed the way children sleep, one arm hanging off the edge, a stuffed rabbit abandoned near her feet. On the wall above her bed hung a drawing she had made months earlier. 2 stick figures, a big one and a small one, standing under a sky full of crayon airplanes. Underneath, in careful, uneven letters, she had written, "My dad flies and comes home." Marcus stood in the doorway for a long time. He thought about Diane. He thought about the promise he had made over a hospital bed, when the whole world had felt like it was ending. "Promise me she'll still laugh." She did. Not every single day. Not without shadows, but she laughed. That morning in the café, and every morning since, she had kept laughing, and he had kept her world soft, and that, in the end, was the only mission that had ever truly mattered to him. He thought about the man he used to be, the one who measured his worth in flights, survived, and limits broken. And he thought about the man he had become, the one who measured it in lunchboxes packed and bedtimes kept, and one little girl who fell asleep certain, all the way down to her bones, that her father would always come home. He had spent the first half of his life learning how to do everything a human being could possibly do inside a machine moving faster than sound. He had spent the second half learning something far harder. That real strength is not the thing you do when everyone is watching and expecting you to strike. It is the thing you choose not to do when a child is watching, and learning from you what kind of person she is allowed to become. Marcus walked over and pulled the blanket up over Maya's shoulder. She stirred, just slightly. "Daddy," she mumbled, not really awake. "I'm here, sweet pea," he said softly. "Go back to sleep." She did instantly the way only a child who feels completely safe can. And as Marcus turned off the light and stepped quietly into the hall, he understood something that no flight, no medal, and no boardroom had ever taught him. Dignity is not weakness wearing a polite face. It is power held under perfect control. It is the hand that does not strike back because a child is watching. It is the father who refuses to let another person's ugliness decide what kind of man he becomes. And grace, real grace, is what remains after the noise fades, after the cameras leave, after the world stops cheering for punishment and finally goes quiet, and a man can stand in the dark hallway of a small house, listening to his daughter breathe and know with absolute certainty that he kept the only promise that ever mattered. That morning, a billionaire thought she had slapped a nobody. Instead, she struck a mirror, and in the silence that followed, every single person in that cafe saw very clearly exactly who they truly were. Personal reflection. I keep coming back to one quiet idea inside this story. We are taught, almost from birth, that strength means doing something, hitting back, winning the argument, having the last word. But the older I get, The more I believe the rarest kind of strength is the strength to stand still, to absorb someone's cruelty without passing it down, to let the truth defend itself, even when staying silent costs you something. Marcus did not win that morning because he was once a remarkable pilot. He won because, with his daughter watching, he refused to let one cruel person decide what kind of father he would be. And maybe that is the real lesson here. We cannot always control the storms that walk through our door, but we can always control whether we become one. If this story moved you, take a moment right now to hit that subscribe button, because stories like this one only reach the people who need them when you help them travel. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in that cafe? Would you have chosen reaction, or would you have chosen restraint? And before you go, drop the name of your city below, because I genuinely love seeing how far these stories reach. This story is a work of fiction, dramatized for storytelling. All names, characters, companies, and events are entirely imaginary, and any resemblance to real people or organizations is purely coincidental.